What is up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Three Gyms Talk Hockey. The 2025 draft is less than a week away. We are 3 days away. It's Tuesday, June 24th right now. The draft is on the 27th. We got an exciting little mock top 10 draft that we're going to do, just run down our top 10 picks. And then we're going to talk about some trade signings that happened over the course of the last few days. So, yeah, fellas, obviously, I'm an Islander fan. The Islanders have the first overall pick. There's been some questions. 365 days ago, there was a conversation as to who's going to be the first overall pick, and there still is a conversation. But it kind of seems like that conversation has narrowed down with Matthew Schaefer being declared the consensus number one overall pick, or number one prospect, I should say. So, yeah, let's get right into it. As I just said, the Islanders have the first overall pick. There's a lot of people that I know that want to take James Higgins with this pick. And I know a lot of people that want to argue Michael Misa for this pick. But in my opinion, I think you almost have to take Matthew Schaefer for the reason that he's by far the best defenseman in the draft. There's a big argument as to how his sample size hasn't been as big as other players going into this draft. He only played 17 games, had 22 points. But at the end of the day, the Islanders need a franchise defenseman. They haven't had one in so long. And on top of it, he's one of the younger players in the draft, only being 17, having a birthday on September 5th of 2007. So what do you guys have for this first overall pick and why?
Well, I think this draft is very interesting because unlike the previous years, there isn't necessarily a generational talent in this draft. Like there's not a Bedard or a Celebrini. Next year there's obviously McKenna. So it's kind of interesting to see how the first picks, at the beginning of the year it was all Higgins. Everyone projected him to go number one, and then things have kind of flip-flopped. I also agree that Schaefer should be the first pick. Obviously getting hurt early in the year at the World Juniors kind of you did give him a narrow scale on what to scout on him, but he's a great skater, offensive minded defenseman. He can easily run the power play, and it's a good choice for the Islanders because you don't really know what the future holds for Dobson, who is currently your best defenseman. So if he walks, Schaefer can easily take over that role and be your number one defenseman for years and years to come.
Yeah, I think we're all in agreement on Schaefer. We all think should be the number one, and we all agree that he should. But I think this gives Islanders a lot of flexibility to take Matthew Schaefer because he's the best defenseman in the draft by far. I think this draft is a forward-heavy class. There's a lot of guys that I could see getting in the top, sneaking into the top 5, sneaking into the top 10 that we probably wouldn't think of. But there's not many defensemen, and I think they're going to move up the draft boards after Schaefer is getting drafted one because there's not many after him that I really like and has the upside of Schaefer being a running the power play type defenseman. All the other defensemen I see in the top 5, 10 are big body defensemen, lockdown D guys that don't really show the upside of Schaefer. And going in for the Islanders, I think if you draft Schaefer, it gives you a lot of flexibility on the backside as you have Dobson and Romanov that have question marks. You don't know if you're going to trade him, keep him, play it by ear there. But also you could find forwards down in the draft and even trade up if you decide that you want to. There's a lot of moving parts for the Islanders right now. They're new GM. They're looking for new things to do. So they could trade Peugeot, Dobson, Romanov, and to go back into the top 10 and get another forward.
Listen, I completely agree. You had mentioned the fact that there's obviously a lot of question marks within the Islanders, and that's one thing that I kind of wanted to point out. I didn't want to go on a little rant when I made my prediction as to who the Islanders would select, but that's a big reason as to why I want Matthew Schaefer. The Islanders have a much better forward prospect pool than they do defensively. They have guys like Callum Ritchie, who's expected to be in the lineup as soon as next year. Then they have Cole Eisman, who I expect within the next couple years, Danny Nelson, Quinn Finley, all a bunch of NCAA guys that have proven to be pretty solid prospects for the Islanders. And I expect them to be all within the lineup over the course of the next 2-3 seasons. And then on top of it, you have guys like Barzy and Bo who are signed long-term already. You have Simone Holmstrom, who I expect to get re-signed. He's still very young. He's proven to be a pretty solid middle six in the NHL. So now you kind of move back to the back end. And as you mentioned, Dobson and Romanov, they're both RFAs. Another name that I want to bring up is Tony DeAngelo. He's a restricted free agent this year. I think, like, personally, in a perfect world, if you could get Dobson and Romanov to re-sign, the $11 million that Dobson's asking for is not something I personally would be willing to pay him, especially after the season that he just had. But I think that you almost have to keep one of Dobson or DeAngelo just because of the fact they're right-handed defensemen. I think Romanov you almost have to keep, but in a perfect world, you'd keep Dobson and Romanov. Now, adding Schaefer to that, he's going to be your number one defenseman in a couple of years. Let him get acclimated to the NHL game. Let him adjust. Let him find his way. And he's going to be a really solid goal or defenseman. And then on top of it, the Islanders have their goaltender for the future in Ilya Sorokin. So I feel like that's a safe pick. That's a pick that a majority of people predict is going to happen. But then, as we mentioned, I understand the argument for James Hagan, the hometown kid. I love Hagans. He's a great player. I love Misa. I think that he's probably the most talented player within the draft. He had the most productive draft year. But all in all, I feel like Darsh wants to go for a championship, and it's not necessarily about the storyline. But if somehow, some way, the Islanders could land both players, that'd be cool. But as of right now, you only have the first overall pick, so you got to look at the best player in the draft, and that's Matthew Schaefer. Pick number 2. This is Milko. Before we started, I kind of want to point this out. You said that you think that Chicago potentially tries to move up to get the number 2 pick, but we'll get into that conversation in a little bit. With San Jose keeping their pick, I'm pretty sure that 1 and 2 was essentially the same for everybody, but do we all agree on Michael Misa here?
Yes, I have Misa as well. And when Melko talked about trading up at first, I thought it was crazy. But now that I think about it, I could see it because the Sharks already have center depth galore. They have their 1 and 2 centers locked up for the next 5 years already with Macklin Celebrini and Will Smith, both looking like they will stay at center because they're both very good two ways. But they also showed a lot of good signs last year. And Misa is a dominantly center, so I could see the Sharks moving down, but I would not expect it to be at 3 with the Blackhawks, but I'll let Milks get into that and why the Blackhawks would want to do that.
Yeah, so I have Misa going at 2. Obviously, very good year last year, had 134 points with 62 goals. As you guys were saying, the Sharks have center depth for the future, and this would only add to it. But in the previous month or two, you've heard Greer talk about willing to trade down in the draft. Like I don't think he necessarily thinks that this is the strongest draft, and I think he's willing to move down. And especially when a team like the Blackhawks need to get a lot of help for Bedard. You need a second line center, first of all, and a guy who can play with Bedard on the power play and give him some support. And for the Blackhawks, I don't think you'd have to give up a tremendous amount as much as like if you were trying to trade up from the 5th or the 7th pick, obviously. And I really think that having a guy like Misa will allow Bedard to it'll free up Bedard a little bit because then you have to worry about two dominant players, right? You have to like line match forwards a specific way with those two guys. And I also think that Misa could be an NHL ready guy right away. I've heard rumors that BU's offered him money. I'm sure there's a bunch of NCAA teams reaching out to him, but I could totally see him just jumping right into the league and the Blackhawks wanting to be like, look, we want to develop you. with Bedard. I think they could be a great tandem for the time coming. And it would kind of be like what the Sharks have, where it's Macklin and Will Smith, and then you have Bedard and Michael Misa.
Well,
But
Dud,
if the
I'm gonna stop you right there real quick and just say, like, I love all the hypotheticals as to why he should go or why you love him being in Chicago, but why, like, you have him at number 2, and right now San Jose has a number 2. If
I know
Chicago
that's what I was
doesn't,
going to get.
I was gonna say if Chicago doesn't trade down, what do you do if you're San Jose? Like, you try to move something?
Well,
Because I kind of had something in mind. That's why I was bringing that up.
well, I think you would have to give San Jose, if you're trying to move up in the draft and you're not Chicago, obviously, you're going to have to give up a lot more to get that number 2 pick. And honestly, I don't know. It really depends on who's trying to trade up, but I also really like Misa to the Sharks. They would have so much center depth and they would have so much young talent to build around. Like, they could easily be a playoff team in who knows, 2-3 years. You got Will Eklund, Will Smith, Macklin, Quinn Musty, who's developing still. Few other guys that you can plug in there. They just traded for Askarov. I can't remember how to say his name, but
yeah,
good young goalie. So, like, I could totally see them just staying where they want unless they get an offer that's kind of unrefusable.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of San Jose taking Misa, what I was going to say is he's by far the best forward in the draft, had the highest production out of any player in this draft class. And with that selection, like you said, I think he could be ready to be in the NHL as soon as next year. And with that being said, the Sharks could have kind of a sick core 4 in, obviously, Misa Celebrini, Will Smith, and William Eklund, as we just mentioned those names. And then on top of it, you have a guy like Quentin Musty who's developing within the organization. He will be in the NHL sooner rather than later. So now I'm saying is rather than trading down, because trading down doesn't make any sense for me. It makes sense to trade up if you're Chicago. But for me, if you're San Jose, it doesn't make sense to trade down because there's not a defenseman. Right now, if you're San Jose, you need a D-man. So from the second that there's no defenseman worthy enough of taking at number 2 or 3, why are you going to move picks and get not a worse player, but you understand what I'm getting with that statement. Now, if you have, let's just say, a core 4, the 4 that I just said, would you maybe consider moving somebody like William Eklund, who's the oldest of that core 4, and try to get an NHL-rated defenseman out of someone like him? You know what I mean? Rather than moving in the draft because you don't have a D-man to take.
Yeah, but
one
also
thing,
you can
go Milks. Okay, I'll go. One thing you said is the Sharks need defensemen. I completely agree with that. They're set up young forwards. They got a young goalie, and I could see the Sharks trading out. I just don't see it with the Blackhawks because, like you said, there's no other defenseman that's worthy going top 5. And if the Sharks were to trade down, I would personally think it would be with the Penguins, who the Rangers just sent them their 12th overall pick. Penguins now have 11th and 12th overall. They don't really have any prospects. They don't have any top tier prospects. I could see him going up to number 2 and getting the top forward in Michael Misa. And as we said, there's a clear top 2 in the draft with Schaefer and Misa. And then after that, it falls off a little bit. Still very good forwards. But if anyone were to trade down and trade up, I think it would be the Penguins to trade up, and the Sharks would trade down a little further down to maybe get their defenseman that they want at a better value at 11 and 12 instead of 2 or 3.
Would you take that trade straight up?
11. I think
11 and 12 for the 2.
I think that would need a little bit. I think it would be a little bit more. 11 and 12 for number 2 overall. Definitely think they need more than that. Or if I were the Sharks, I would want more. The Penguins have a lot of picks. They've been gathering up picks the last couple of years, trading away. But I could see him get thrown in another future second or a future third or a random prospect if the Sharks want.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a good idea, and I definitely think there'd be need to be a little more in that deal to get it done. But also, we're talking about how the Sharks need a defenseman. Guys, they have $41 million in cap space.
But there's no young defenseman unless they go after an RFA, which
unless they go after an RFA. They could
Dobson
go
is
after Dobson.
Yep.
You know, like they have so much cap to work with because they're so young and everyone's pretty much on entry level deals. Like they can go and find a proven NHL defenseman in free agency. They don't need to try to do it in the draft if they don't see a defenseman that they like.
Well, that was ultimately my argument in terms of it makes sense for San Jose to move down in the draft. It makes sense for Chicago to move up. I agree with Dozer. I see San Jose moving, just not with the Blackhawks because it doesn't seem worth it. But now, if you're San Jose, you kind of got to, all right, is it worth it to trade down? Like, do we want one of these defensemen? Or are we just making that move just to say that we did it? So at the end of the day, like you can't really go wrong with Michael Misa. So if I'm San Jose, one way or another, okay, you might say we're stacked on forwards, but what's the harm in adding one more? You just have some trade capital.
Not a problem to have at all.
Yeah, I mean, and now moving over to Chicago, as we mentioned, we obviously know who you would take if Chicago moves up in the draft, Milks, but who would you take if they stay at number 3?
So I actually had them taking Porter Martone at number 3. And I know across a lot of mock drafts, he's kind of all across the board. But if you look at, he's 6'3", 204 pounds, tallied 98 points. He has a lot of comparisons to what people say, like a Brady Tkachuk type of player. He plays on the wing, so, you know, maybe you send him to college for a year to develop. And then you can plug him in right with Bedard. He's a guy with high hockey IQ, and now you have a guy that can skate with Bedard on the first line and really give him help. Like, yeah, having Misa, like we were talking about, that would create more depth for the roster, and that would help Bedard in one way. But if you get a guy on his line that takes some of the attention off of Bedard, you don't have two guys, you know, trying to force him to the wall and give up a puck or something. This will really free him up because you have two dangerous players to worry about.
Yeah, I also have Porter going third to the Blackhawks. I agree with everything you said, and I think teams are looking for players like a Matty Tkachuk, like a Brady Tkachuk, like a Sam Bennett, because you see what they do in the playoffs. It's not only about regular season. These teams are chasing championships, and they see what kind of players perform in the playoffs. And I think Porter Martone is that perfect. He's got that perfect skill set where it's a size, speed, and skill. And I think he would work perfect with Bedard, like you said. He opens up space for him, not only because there's another threat on the line, but also because he's got a body on his line that will take away some of the physical, like all the defensemen are focused on Bedard. They're hitting him every chance they get. If you have Porter Martone on the line after he develops, he's going to be a physical presence that opens up space for Bedard and gives him more room to shoot and make plays, which I think would be a perfect fit for the Blackhawks. And Martone's a winger. They don't really have any forwards like any other young, good forwards, like we said. So I think that would be a perfect fit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna be the first one with a different pick here. I have Chicago taking Anton Frondel, the first non-North American skater, and I mean, my reasons are kind of similar to you guys, other than the fact that he's a 2C. I almost argue keep Bedard on the wing and have him play with Frondel rather than Frank Nazar. I know Frank Nazar didn't have a full 82-game season. He played in the 50s, whatever he played, 50-something games, had 20-something points. And, okay, we don't know what Frondel is going to do in the NHL yet, but in my imagination, he's going to be better than Frank Nazar. I feel like that's going to complement Connor Bedard a little bit better. I also feel like Bedard could benefit from being a wing rather than a center. So now you kind of have a 1C, 2C situation with Frondel and Frank Nazar. You kind of hope that Nazar kind of plays a little bit of a bigger role within that 2C position rather than a 1C. And you keep Bedard at center, and then if you need to move him over, you can. So similar reasons as to why you guys would take Porter, but that's the reason why I'm taking Anton Frondel. And then on top of it, I think that he has arguably one of the better shots within this draft class, and Chicago needs more goal scoring. Bedard is more of a playmaker, so now you give him a goal scorer, and hopefully you have a little duo for years to come in Chicago.
Yeah, I got a question for you because you said maybe move Bedard to the wing, but if you're the Blackhawks, you're still so early in your sort of rebuild because they don't really have any other pieces to go. I think we all agree they're going to be a bottom 5 team again. But you said moving Bedard to the wing, and if I was Chicago personally, I would try to keep Bedard at center and develop him. I know he had more success on the wing this year. He was one of the worst face-off guys in the league, but I think he's such a good player. You got to stick him out at center because center is such a more valuable position, and just continue to hopefully develop his skills at center. I understand the Frondell pick. I like him a lot as well. Maybe one of the more safe picks in the draft after the top 2. But I just want to know your thoughts on moving Bedard to the wing.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, and you actually brought up one of my arguments, the fact that how terrible he was at faceoffs. And yeah, he is still very young. There's no reason to sit and even freak out if they keep him at center. For me, it was more of a, hey, it's an idea. You had him at the wing or on the wing for a portion of this season. It seemed to fit him better, at least at the NHL level. So why not give him not a legitimate center, because he's a legitimate center, but give him a better center, someone who might suit that style of game in the NHL better than Bedard did. And then on top of it, you have him as a playmaker primarily over a goal scorer, even though obviously Bedard has one of the craziest shots we've ever seen. So I feel like maybe combining those two and making them 2/3 of what could be a future best line in hockey, that would, I feel like, start to develop now. But then again, like you said, I don't think it's time to panic with Bedard at center. Like, there's a reason why I said if that doesn't work out, you could always move Bedard back over. I haven't necessarily given up on him at center, but I feel like if you take Frondell, that's going to be a perfect little mix, because now you take the pressure off of someone like Frank Nazar, and now you start building that center depth. And now even consider it this way. If Bedard sticks out at center, now you could have your top 3 centers being all young players in Bedard, Lindell, and Nazar. So, or Frondell, not Lindell,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. But either way, that was just kind of my thought process. Taking Frondell, I feel like keeping Bedard on the side would kind of suit his game a little bit better, maybe give him a little bit more room. But I don't think it's necessarily time to panic with him at center either. So that's another really good point.
Chime in real quick on that? Yeah, I personally would probably keep Bedard at center because, you drafted him to be your franchise center, and
well,
he's
you
so
also
young.
drafted him to be a franchise player.
Yeah, your franchise.
Yeah,
you draft. He could be the
he's
next
everything for
franchise
Chicago
of the
right
league.
now. Yeah,
He could be the franchise of the league in a few years. So, but what I'm saying is he has so much time to develop, and he still has so much growth to achieve. I could see, this is what I could see though. If they did draft Frondell, I could see them doing kind of like what the Oilers do with Draisaitl and McDavid. If they need to make a late game push, okay, then put Bedard on the wing and Frondell at center and put those two together to try to, give yourself a chance at tying a game or closing a game out or something like that. But I think if you're going into a game, your lineup should probably have like Bedard as your 1A, Frondell as your 1B, like for your centers.
Yeah, I mean, I don't hate that at all. My mind didn't even really go to that, to be honest. But that's another really good point. But yeah, I just feel like a player like Bedard, he could be used in all situations. He could be used so freely. You kind of just throw him out there. Hey, this is what I want from you, and he's going to give his 110%. So, yeah, I don't think that either of those picks would be really crazy because, like you guys said, keeping Bedard at center, giving him a good wing, that could benefit him a lot. But then again, I'm kind of just taking what happened towards the end of last season or for a portion of last season with him on the wing and kind of acclimated that into this season, assuming that they might try to maintain a similar sort of structure. But time will tell. I mean, who knows? The preseason schedule just came out, so they might be scouting the opposition, figuring out what they want to do with those two from now. But 4th overall pick, Utah Mammoth. First time they're selecting not as the hockey club, but I want to point out that I really think that this this is the one pick in the top 5. If any pick gets moved, it will be this one. I feel like there's been a lot of conversation with Utah being willing to trade the pick. I know, obviously, as an Islander fan, a lot of conversation about the Islanders potentially getting that 4th overall pick. But sticking it out with Utah, Utah has the pick right now. They might have the pick when the clock strikes 0, but I'm going to go. Okay, before I even make my pick, I know that Utah has made it very clear that they like Brady Martin. He's obviously a great fit. They've mentioned that they wanna, or that they're looking into him, but I think that they take Caleb Desjardins.
I think it's Desnoyers,
Yeah,
something
he's
like
the
that.
he's the best player in the QMJHL, or he was this past season. He was the best player on the best team in the QMJHL. He was the youngest player on his team. And I feel like he's a perfect fit for a team like Utah with a player like Logan Cooley, because they could be a 1-2 punch right down the middle at center. Someone like him, I could almost see it. A comparable that I have is a Heeshear and Jack Hughes type situation in the middle with him and Logan Cooley. So now imagine Utah has 2 really young centers, and I feel like Utah just overall has they're heading in the right direction since the relocation. So what are your guys' thoughts on that pick? I mean, like we said, there's been conversation. There's a chance that pick gets traded, but what do you guys think?
There's been a lot of question marks with what Utah's going to do, especially since they kind of jumped pretty high up in the draft. No one expected them to land the 4th pick. So, again, a lot of different things can play out with this situation. And I'm going off what I've seen and what I've heard, and I've seen a lot of rumblings about Brady Martin and the Mammoths liking his gameplay. I did a little research on him. I believe he could be a second line center for them in the future. He is regarded as more of a physical forward who can also facilitate the puck very well, become a good playmaker for them. And obviously you could have Cooley running the first line, but this guy has a great physical ability, and then he's also got great vision as well. So a lot of these guys that are going, I want to say in the top 7, besides Schaefer, are all centers that could probably be a 1B to most of these organizations 1A. So I feel like Brady Martin is just going to be another complement to a 1A like Logan Cooley.
So is that your pick for Utah?
Brady Martin's my pick, yeah.
Okay. I also have Caleb Desnoyers, however you pronounce his name, as my Utah pick, but I actually have a star written down next to Utah if someone didn't mention it, because I think Utah is the prime candidate to trade out of the top 5 as well, so on, for all the reasons that you stated. But I also think Utah is trying to make the playoffs. They had a very good season last year, missed the playoffs by a couple points, but they were in it for most of the year until maybe the last week or two. And I think they want to get into the playoffs. I know their GM wants people to show up to the games more, and wants a more people to show up. Just, I could see him trading the pick for a player to make them better now, but I also think that they would have done that already. So that's why I have them staying and picking here. They have Caleb Desnoyers, and I think they'll take him because he's a proven winner. Like you said, he's the youngest player on the best team in the queue. He's a 2-way center, and like you said, Logan Cooley is an offensive-minded skill center. I think Caleb would fit Utah's team in a couple of years perfectly, as he could roll in 3 center, 2 center, and just be an impact defensively and offensively on their team. So they have so many young, good wingers that could produce. He's just a perfect 2-way center for them. Everyone needs a defensive center, so I think that's just a perfect fit.
Yeah, and the one thing I'm going to add is the fact that if they get rid of the pick, I feel like one prime candidate would be the Islanders, and the only reason for that wouldn't even be to take the same player, to be to take James Higgins. So that's something that I could add. So, like, who knows if they move the pick, someone could have a snag. But that's where we sit at right now. At number 5, we have the Nashville Predators. The Nashville Predators are coming off of an atrocious season. Everyone had them making the playoffs, all their offseason signings, Stamkos, Marchessault, Brady Shea. Everyone expected a breakout season from those veterans, and they got the complete opposite. They now sit with the 5th overall pick. Barry Trotz has a decision to make, and if you guys were in his shoes, what's that decision going to be?
I got the Preds taking Anton Frondell here. Very, very disappointed season, like you said, for the Predators. And I think Frondell, other than Schaefer and Misa, would be the first guy to make the NHL or crack the NHL. And I think the Predators want to be competitive. Like you said, they signed all the Barry Trotz went out last free agency and signed Stamkos, Brady Shea, Jonathan Marchessault. They want to get back into the playoffs in a tough West. And Frondell, I think, from my board, is the clear next forward up and the forward that has the quickest route to the NHL, in my opinion.
Yeah, I have the same pick. I have Frondell going number 5 to the Predators. I personally think that in this entire draft, I think Frondell has the highest upside. I mean, we won't find out for years to come, but I've seen a lot of things to like from this kid. He can basically do anything you need him to do, and the Predators need to find a difference maker, and I think you will find one with Anton Frondell. And I completely agree with what Dozer said, that he can absolutely be NHL ready probably within the next year.
I completely agree that he could be NHL ready within the next year. And considering that he is no longer on my draft board, I'm going to have to go with the Long Island native James Higgins with this pick. Barry Trotz, just from when he was a coach of the Islanders, when he was coaching in the NHL in general, we know that he's a coach that loves the little details. He's all about the little details. In James Higgins' case, he has some of, if not the best hockey sense in this draft class. One thing that scouts really pointed out within his game was just the little details, the professionalism of the way that he plays the game. So his puck support, the way that he wins puck battles, just how he plays in the D zone. So when you have a player like that, and on top of it, may I add that he's also an unbelievable playmaker. So a lot of these scouts, with that being said, believe that this will kind of help him transition into the NHL, or at least make his transition smoother. I think that Barry Trotz, with the type of team that he's trying to build, those little details matter. So when you get a young player like that to kind of exemplify what you believe in, that's going to be a good fit. So going back to what we said, Nashville did not have a very productive season at all. They had a very disappointing season. But James Higgins, in my opinion, the same way that you guys think that Anton's the best forward available, I think that that's the case with James Higgins. So I feel like if you're Nashville in that position, you got to pull the trigger on Higgins. On to pick number 6. The Philadelphia Flyers are selecting 6th overall. The Flyers really need center depth. And now they have the addition of Trevor Zegras as well. And if I was Philly, I would pull the trigger on Jake O'Brien. I think that Jake O'Brien is okay. The one negative that I'm going to point out and get it out of the way right off the bat is the fact that he's a little bit lanky. He's 6'2", 170 pounds. He's going to have to put on some muscle before he makes the jump into the NHL. But the Flyers, who are already ahead of their rebuild because of Michkov coming over sooner, it's I feel like that center depth is going to really help them. Now you have Michkov, you have Zegras, you got other young players within the system. So that's my pick. I think Jake O'Brien in a couple years would be a really good fit within the Flyers organization.
Yeah, so for the Flyers, I have them taking Hagens because I believe he's the next best player on the board for them to take as well, supplying more center depth. Obviously, we know how skilled of a player Hagens can be, and he's obviously a great playmaker. It's going to be very interesting to see how he plays at BC this year. Obviously, not being on a line with Perreault and Leonard, who I think were probably regarded as the best line in college hockey last year, and Ryan Leonard being one of the best players in college hockey, being a Hobey Baker finalist. So it'll be interesting to see how he kind of does when he has to carry the line. But being a freshman, averaging a point per game at BC, and then in the World Juniors, he did pretty well as well. He had 5 goals and 4 assists in those 7 games in which the U.S. did win the World Juniors. And again, I think he's the next best player for the Flyers to draft. He's young. He can fit their scheme. And now that Torts isn't there, it kind of opens up all these young guys to do, things that Torts wouldn't really tolerate, like pulling out the bag of tricks for all the skill moves they have. Zegras for the Michigan stuff. Michkov is an unbelievable talent who I don't even think we saw half of what he could do this year just because of Torts as being the kind of coach he is. And yeah, I think Hagens can further help offensively and really help this rebuild get going.
I made a
Yeah,
mistake on mine. I totally forgot to have the Flyers on mine, but if I must have got the order wrong, but my Flyers guy, I would take Jake O'Brien with Solam Ihas, and I think he is one of the more underrated centers in the draft. I could see him dropping out of the top 10 completely, but for me, I have him 6. I think he would work well with the Flyers. They don't have many young centers, and they just traded for Zegras, and neither of you guys mentioned. We'll talk about that later, but I think Zegras is more of a winger, and he's like a young piece that they will probably have for a while. I think they want to build up that center depth and that center core, and I think Jake O'Brien is that piece for them. And there's a lot of good centers in this draft. I think he's one of the better two-way guys after Caleb Desnoyers, and I think he would be a great fit for the Flyers and their young core that they're building.
Yeah, I agree. And actually, the one thing that I was going to pose a question. Obviously, Trevor Zegras could play center. Assuming that they take Jake O'Brien, he's a center. Obviously, he has a couple of years to develop, so we're not sure exactly what the lineup's going to look like. But now you have flexibility because now you could put someone like Trevor Zegras over to the wing, or you could even utilize everyone within the power play. So we'll kind of see what that roster looks like in the next couple of years because I don't think Jake O'Brien's NHL ready just yet. And then on top of it, they have Noah Cates signed $4 million a season for the next few seasons. Or for the next 4 seasons to be exact. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. But we got 2/3 of the same pick. On to the next. Milko, I'm gonna let you take a hold of this one. The Boston Bruins. You're Don Sweeney. Who do you pick?
If I'm Don Sweeney and all has gone according to what I have on my mock draft so far, I'm taking Jake O'Brien. I think he's an unbelievable playmaker, and he kind of fits what the Bruins like to draft. He's a tall, lengthy center. He's kind of like Dean Letourneau, who we drafted last year. Dean Letourneau is obviously a lot taller, but both guys, they need to put on weight, only weighing in at 170, but he's not going to be a guy that's NHL ready right away. And the Bruins need some serious help at center. We obviously picked up Elias Lindholm in free agency, hoping that he could be that top line center for us, and unfortunately had a down year, did not meet expectations. Our prospect pool is very weak, so we just need to grab a center who has the outlook or the potential of being a top line center. And I think Jake O'Brien fits that perfectly. He's kind of proven that he can do it all. So if I'm Don Sweeney, I'm taking Jake O'Brien.
I like the pick. I had O'Brien in my original one, but then I had the
Yeah.
Flyers. So, but if I'm the Bruins here, I I like your mindset with the Bruins. I love their tall, big, physical forwards. So in that mindset, I got the next best thing available from O'Brien. I got Roger McQueen, and
Mhm.
I think he's 6'5" center. He's huge. He could play make and he could sit in front of the net. The Bruins need centers. They've been struggling with center depth for the last 5 years now. They got Pasta, they had Martian, they had Zaka, who was, I would say, more of a winger than a center,
Yeah.
but it had him playing center. So I think Roger McQueen would be good for the Bruins. Huge body. I know the Bruins love their big bodies, and if O'Brien's not there, I have him taking McQueen. And one sneaky pick, you said Brady Martin. I could see him going Brady Martin as well. He's not as big as McQueen, but also a skilled center that we talked about a little bit
Yeah,
before.
and a physical guy too.
Yeah.
So yeah, I could see it.
As per my mock draft, if I'm Don Sweeney, I'm going with the best guy available. And Milko, I think that you'd like this pick, Porter Martone. I think that, like you said, obviously your prospect depth isn't great. Porter Martone is more of a power forward. He's like a Brady Tkachuk-esque player. And as you guys mentioned before, when he was in your guys' pick, he's big, he's physical, he could skate. And I mean, a majority of scouts have said that he brings that total package that teams look for. I think that's obviously really important. I almost feel like he brings a Boston Bruins type of game of his own. So I feel like he'd be a perfect fit. He has size, as I mentioned, and I think that size, along with everything that he could do with that size, is really teams want that. That's what teams look for. So I feel like if you're the Bruins and he's available, that's who you take. That's the best player. And I also feel like that's Boston Bruin hockey. It's hard, heavy hockey. You do the right things, and who knows? I mean, if he could be a winger behind Pasta, he might be able to learn a thing or two. He might score a couple more goals than what's expected of him. So
Yeah.
if I'm in that position, I'm taking Porter Martone. But then again, he might not even be on the board at that point, which I wouldn't be surprised about either.
Yeah, I love that pick. If Porter Martone's there, I'd hope we draft him. He's exactly what we need. He's a guy who can score some goals. I honestly believe he could be NHL ready. I doubt he goes straight to the league, but again, big physical forward who can put the puck in the net. Would not have any hate on that pick.
Yeah, I mean, pretty straightforward there. I want to move over to Seattle with the number 8 pick. Seattle, this one could go one of two ways. Me personally, I think if you're Seattle, you need a defenseman. You have a bunch of forwards within your system. You got guys like Matty Beniers, obviously Mason Marchman, who you just traded for, Capo Caco, who you got in a trade in the middle of the season. You have Shane Wright. And then their defensemen, their top 2 defensemen are 28 years old and older, which isn't crazy old, but you need some younger players within that system as well. They have Brendan Montour and Vince Dunn, who are their main D guys, in my opinion. So with that, I'm going to go with Radim Murtha, who I feel like is the next best defenseman after Matthew Schaefer. Seattle is probably the first team that really other than San Jose, but Murtha is not worthy of a second overall pick. They're the first team that really needs defensemen, and that's probably one of the first spots that I'm pulling the trigger if I need a defenseman and I have a player of that value or of that caliber within my reach.
I'm just going to go here because I also have Radim Murtka, however you say it. I think I still have Higgins on my board. It's between Higgins, which is best forward available, or best defenseman available, and I think that is Radim. And I think they could, if they want defensemen, they could go a couple of ways here, but I think Murtha is He's a 6'6", 200-pound defenseman, right-sided. The next defensemen that are coming up are both left-handed. My next two best defensemen are both left-handed, and they're more of skill guys, not puck-moving skill defensemen. And I think the Kraken just want a lockdown D guy coming up. They don't have any defenseman prospects that I know of that are that high. So I think they just want to get a solid player in at number 8 that could be their Elsa Lundell or their top lockdown defenseman like Jacob Slavin that they could build around for the next couple of years. And
I mean, listen, I'm gonna say right now,
big boy defenseman.
Brendan Montour is locked up for years in Seattle.
Yes,
and that's another reason why I love that, because having a Brendan Montour who's a righty, now you have him playing behind Brendan Montour until he's comfortable enough to take on that first defensive pair. So I think that Murtha playing behind someone like Montour, Stanley Cup winner, a really solid defenseman within the NHL, I think that could only benefit him, which only adds to my reason as to why I feel like he's the best pick. But yeah, like you said, they don't have many defensive prospects. So for me, it's a no-brainer. But Milko, you're on the clock.
Yeah, so I went in a little bit of an opposite direction, and I had them taking another center in Caleb Desnoyers, who's still on my board. You know, obviously we talked about him earlier. At the beginning of the year, he was regarded as a top 5 pick in most drafts, very high upside, and I think he could be, again, like a really good center that can develop under their system. They have their number 1 guy in Matty Beniers, and then you got Shane Wright coming up in the lineup. Chandler Stevenson's currently right now their second center, and he hasn't really lived up to the deal that he signed there, and he's there for a while. So I think Caleb Desnoyers can provide a lot of offensive help for them. Personally, I don't think I would take Redeem as high as 8. I could see if you really liked him, you could probably trade back into the draft at somewhere between like 12 and 15 if you really like. I don't think I would regard him as being that high. Yes, he has the physical attributes that you like in a prospect, being that big right shot defenseman, but I think if you were to put Caleb Desnoyers and Redeem in a pool together, I think you'd pick Caleb Desnoyers most times.
Yeah,
I agree with you, Milk, saying that I don't think Redeem is a top 10 player in this draft either. Maybe not even top 15. It's just the need for defensemen. There's not, after Schaefer, there's not many defensemen, and he is the clear number 1 right-handed D. So that's why I think the Kraken right here will select him, and we see it in every draft. Like there's usually that one defenseman that we don't really think is a top 10 player and still gets drafted top 10. I can't remember who it was last year.
The guy on the Canadians, who was that a few years ago?
Reinbach.
Reinbach. Yeah, there's always that defenseman that kind of sneaks up draft boards just because a team is in need of one. So that's why I have him at number 8.
That's exactly why I have him at number 8. But now on to the cursed franchise, the Buffalo Sabres. They hope to do something right this time around. I'm going to direct this one over to you guys right off the rip. I want to hear what you guys have. Because who I have, you guys already picked.
Yeah, I have somebody that you guys already picked as well. It's James Higgins. Not many people have him falling this far. I've seen rumblings about him falling just because of young. He played with good players. He might not kind of create for himself as much as these other players, but has all the potential in the world. Could be a top 3 player. Could be the best player. Like any of these guys can be. But I think if you're the Sabres, you just got to go best player available. Whoever that might be, you got to hit on somebody. So that's basically my reasoning.
Yeah, so I'm going to be going with someone that we haven't talked about yet, and I believe could be a useful asset for their team. I have Victor Eklund going to the Buffalo Sabres. And the reason I put Victor Eklund in there is because of all the rumors surrounding JJ Peterka. Obviously, very good forward that they have. I don't think he's happy there, and he's a difference maker for their team, and that's a big loss if you lose a guy like him. But then if you can draft a guy like Victor Eklund, who's a sniper, and he can fill that role on the wing where Peterka could potentially leave, I think it'd be a great asset to get. And it's so tough because this, like, Victor Eklund was also regarded as a very high prospect at the beginning of the year, and then he kind of slid a little bit, right? But I would still personally think that if you're basically going to lose one of your top wingers, but you also have the potential to draft the potential best winger in this draft outside of maybe Porter, that I think you jump on it because they don't need defensemen anyway.
Yeah, I agree with your reasonings. And for a similar reason, I'm going to go with Brady Martin, assuming that he doesn't go to Utah like a lot of talks have pointed to. And my reasonings are fairly similar. But the one thing I want to point out about Brady Martin is the fact that he's a really good two-way center. I feel like the Sabres could kind of benefit from a little bit of everything right now, so why not start down the middle? But he's also very physical. He's more of like a power forward type player. So I feel like adding that within Buffalo's culture and maybe trying to just build something off of that would be beneficial. Listen, like right now, I don't think anyone really has answers how to fix Buffalo. I think that on paper, Buffalo should be a lot better than they are. I think that a majority of people could agree with that. So that would be my pick, just because I feel like that would be one of the better players available, and he would almost fit what the Buffalo Sabres lack. So that's my reasoning for Brady Martin going number 9 to Buffalo. And for the last pick, we have the Anaheim Ducks. The Anaheim Ducks put up a fight this year. I'm not going to lie. They ended up with the 10th overall pick. And with that, I'm going to go with the player that Milko just selected, and Victor Eklund. I think that Anaheim needs wingers to kind of join Cutter Gauthier. They have their 1-2 center punch with Leo Carlson and Mason McTavish. So I think if you could get another really good winger, that could benefit you guys. You might have like a 1-2 punch on your first and second line in the future. So that's kind of where my head's at. I also just feel like Victor Eklund is the best player available at that point of the draft. So what do you fellas have?
I also have Victor Eklund for the same reasons as you. I think they could go defense here. They have a little bit of struggles, but they also have young defensemen, Olin Zellweger, Jackson Lacombe. They have some good defensemen. As you said, they have centers and Leo Carlson and who's the other one? Mason McTavish. And yeah, for the same reasons, I think Victor Eklund fits perfectly. He's my best forward on the board. They need a winger, and he's a skill guy. And they got rid of Trevor Zegras, who was like their main skill guy, and take another shot on a scoring winger who could bring some skill to the lineup when you got big centers that already play the two-way game. So that's my reason.
Cool. Okay. I have Anaheim actually taking a defenseman here. I think Anaheim has a lot of young forward prospects. And yeah, I think if Victor Eklund's there, that's not a bad pick. I have them taking Jackson Smith on defense. And the only reason I have them taking Jackson Smith instead of a guy like Redeem or Aitchison is because they don't necessarily need big body defensemen. They already have Radko Gudas. They traded for Jacob Trouba in the middle of the year. So they have big bodies with physical presence. And I think adding a guy like Jackson Smith, who is more of a skilled defender, it would be really I think it'd be really fun to watch him play with both Lacombe and Minchikov, who they recently have. So like you'll have a lot of skill on the back end, and you'll also have some physicality as well. And that's kind of my reasoning with that one.
Now, I have a question for you. You have obviously mentioned Gudis and Truba. Both of their contracts expire after next season. After next season, what do you do?
Well, it's kind of up to the organization. Radko Gudas is your captain. I would assume you would probably try to re-sign your captain. Jacob Trouba is a question mark, absolutely, but
Yeah,
I don't
no.
know
The
what
only
the Ducks
reason
do in that situation, to be honest.
the only reason why I'm bringing that up, and it wasn't really to put you on the spot, but I don't think that they re-sign Radko Gudas after next season. He's going to be 36. Jacob Trouba, I think that he's a big question mark. He's making $8 million right now, so unless he wants to stay there for less, or unless a team's willing to give him something of that sort, I think that he might be gone after next season too.
I honestly thought Trouba had a longer deal. To be honest, I didn't know his contract expired next season.
Yeah, no, that's the only reason why
I
I kind of posed
thought
that
he was
question.
for a few more years.
Yeah, no, just because you mentioned how they have those big defensemen, so I was just kind of fast forwarding a
Yeah.
year and kind of bringing up the fact that in a year they might not have those big name defensemen anymore, and you might not even have that player within your organization yet. So, but yeah, that rounds off our top 10 picks of this upcoming draft. A lot of similarities. I mean, similar players, a little bit off here and there. A couple players that we had at the same exact spots, both early and late within that top 10. So, yeah, let's keep note of who we picked. I want to see who got the most correct come the top 10 on Friday. But shifting over a little bit, shoot.
Before you say any of that, like, I do want to mention that some of these teams, if a trade does happen, could throw off the entire trajectory of everyone's mock draft. So, you know, if the Mammoths trade out of the 4, or, you know, you see the Mammoths would probably be the most likely the team to trade out, but that could shake up the entire rest of how that draft order goes.
No, 100%. And that's why I'm curious to see who gets the most right, because right now we're picking prior to trades and everything. Like you said, one team makes a move and the whole order gets mangled. But kind of shying away a little bit from the draft, I kind of want to talk a little bit about some trades and signings that have happened over the last couple of days. The first one that I'm going to bring up is the Trevor Zegras trade to the Flyers, just because that kind of just came up. We spoke both about the Flyers and the Ducks, but Zegras got sent to the Flyers for Ryan Poehling, second round pick of this year, and next year's 4th round pick. One thing that we noted is how many draft picks the Flyers actually have, which I think for me makes this pick, or this trade, perfect for Philadelphia. You have a guy like Michkov, who's a skill guy. Now you add Zegras, another skill guy. You have a top 6 pick in this year's draft. So, I mean, I don't know. I think that this move for Philly, it kind of depends on how you like the game too, or how you want to coach the game, how you want to run the game. Because as we mentioned, Torts isn't there anymore. I think Torts would have a heart attack if he had both Michkov and Zegras in his lineup. So, in my opinion, I think it's good. But what are your guys' thoughts on that trade?
So yeah, I love the trade for the Flyers. I'm not in love with the Trevor Zegras as a player, because I don't know how he will be in a playoff situation, but he's a very skilled guy. But for the Flyers, it makes so much sense. And it's kind of like a buy low spot. He had a pretty bad year last year, but like you said, I wrote down they had 7 picks in the top 50. They traded one of those away. That pick, that it was 45 overall. That pick doesn't mean anything to them. They have 6 other picks in the top 50, so that pick doesn't mean anything. Ryan Pelling is a third, fourth line, role player at best, and a 4th rounder next year is a nothing. So all I see is upside for the Flyers with Trevor Zegras, who's still 24, 25 years old, and could still put up 60 to 70 point numbers. I could see that happening I could see that happening this year. If the Flyers have a good year, Sean Couturier is still there, a very good player, very solid player. Yeah, I don't see any downside for the Flyers. And for the Ducks, I don't like the trade for them, honestly. Like, I know you have a lot of young players. You got to offload one of them, or maybe you didn't even have to. But
Yeah.
I feel like they sold way too low for Zegras. I think they could have gotten a lot more than just a 45th overall pick and a depth player to help them right now. I think if you wanted to trade him, now is not the time. Now his value is so low. They should have traded him last deadline, where a buyer at the deadline wanted to get better, and I think they would have gotten a lot more. Maybe not a first round pick the way he was playing, but definitely more than just a 45th overall player and a nothing piece.
Funny you say that. I actually was seeing reports that the Devils offered like a mid first round pick for him at the deadline, and they rejected it.
There you go.
So, they definitely sold extremely low for a guy that you probably could get for a first round pick, and it is kind of confusing to me why they would do it so late when they could just use the rest of the contract he has for this year. Potentially, if you guys are still in a tough spot or not in a playoff spot and you want to try to get a younger piece or you want to get another pick in the draft, then you can do it at the next year's deadline. I just find it like weird how the timing worked with that, because I think they definitely lost on the return part of that, knowing, what Zegras' upside could be, because we've seen it before. And, unfortunately last year he didn't have a great season, but I think a change of scenery for a guy like Zegras could be really beneficial to him. And, now he's not under all this criticism under the Ducks organization, and it kind of releases him a little bit. There's definitely certain players that they just need a change of scenery, and then they start to blossom.
Well, yeah, I completely agree. I think that first and foremost for Zegras, the change of scenery is going to be a night and day difference. He's not going to have the same pressure, but at the same time, I agree with everything that Michael said in terms of Anaheim's return. I was kind of surprised at how low they decided to just ship out Zegras, but at the same time, I feel like just because of the last two seasons where they've been down years, I wouldn't be surprised if they were almost in a bit of a panic and we're just like, all right, like let's get him off our hands. But at the same time, I don't understand why that would be a reason. And if that would actually be a reason, just because you're not in the playoffs yet, you have a top 10 pick, you're most likely selecting another forward. So who knows? Let it play out until the trade deadline next year, see how he plays. Because like you said, his trade value has been higher. This is probably one of the lowest that it's been since he entered the league. And this was just not the time to pull the trigger. So in terms of the Flyers, well done. But Anaheim, they have a lot to figure out and add this to the list, because not having a player like Trevor Zegras doesn't necessarily help a team. I think that it only hurts them.
Yeah, another thing is why it doesn't really make that much sense to me is because they have $36 million in cap. It's not like they needed to do a salary dump with him either. Like he was on a $5 million deal, but it's not like they're against the cap. So that's why it's just strange to me why they would do it at this particular time and sell him for so low.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. Like, they have so much cap. You have the players, and I don't think any of us expect them to be a playoff team next year, even though that's where they want to be. But like, why not keep him for the year, or even half the year? See what his value is at the trade deadline, and then maybe get more value. It's not like they needed to send him out right now. That's why we said the timing doesn't make any sense. He's at an all-time low in value, so like, why not wait?
Unless they're trying to give Mitch Marner a $36 million AAV.
Which also wouldn't even make sense for him.
Like, yeah, I also agree with that Mitch Marner statement. But now I kind of want to move over once again to the Bruins. Mason Lohrei signs an extension. Dud, initial thoughts. I personally love Mason Lohrei.
Oh, I love it. I love the deal. We had to sign him. I was hoping we would. That was the one guy that I really wanted to keep. He's shown a lot of potential. He can score goals for us, and he can also play on the back end. And, he's another one of those just Bruins type of players. He's a long defenseman. He's got a lot of reach, and he can also play the body. And he's proven that he can play in the NHL. I love the little bridge deal because you don't have to give him like a crazy contract right out the gate. So
And
no
on top of it,
problems
he's
with
also so young.
So young. I think he's like 22 or 23 maybe.
He's 24.
Okay. Still. But I love the deal. Love to see that happen when it popped up on my phone.
Yeah, it's a great deal for great bridge deal for the Bruins and for Lowry. And for the Bruins, they don't really have many young NHL pieces right now. I think he's one of the only players on the roster that's under 25. Maybe Patra as well, but he's in and out of the lineup.
Yeah, he's not even a full-time guy.
So I think that Lowry deal, they needed to get it done, and he's going to be there for a while. He's going to get extended after that 2-year deal, and I would be surprised if it's not with Boston again.
I completely agree with that statement. I was actually going to bring up the fact that if he didn't re-sign and the July 1st date came up, I would have hoped that the Islanders would have made a push for him if an option was to get rid of Romanov. So obviously that's off the table, but that's one player that I was kind of hoping the Islanders would have an eye out on if they did ship out Romanov. But great move. I agree. I think that just locks down the big bad Bruin kind of feel that the Bruins defense has. They don't have a single defenseman under 6'3". So, definitely not a defensive core that you wanna go up against. And those are from one team to another. We just spoke about Boston. Now I want to talk about the Rangers. The Rangers now, they elected to give up their first round pick of this year, give it to Pittsburgh to finalize that JT Miller deal, which means that now they don't have to give up an unprotected first round pick in next year's draft. Thoughts? What do you think about that? Did you want them to keep it? Are you glad they got rid of it?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that they got rid of it. At the time, I wanted them to keep it because I think this draft is very deep, very good. But I like that they got rid of it because the Rangers, we don't know what they're going to be next year. They made the conference final 2 years ago, missed the playoffs this year. They want to go back to the playoffs. As a fan, I think they will. And I think keeping that first round pick, if they're good next year, they could use that as ammo to make their team better. As I think they're going to use some of the cap space to pick somebody up this offseason. But I think if they're a good team and they're looking for a playoff team, it gives them flexibility for going into next year, where if they want to make a push for the Stanley Cup or if they want to make a playoff push, they could use that as an asset to trade as well as other pieces. So I love watching the Rangers draft. I want them to draft young players, but I like that they keep it. Next year's draft is going to be well also. And if they're not in a playoff spot, they're going to keep it in hopes that they get lucky like the Islanders did this year. The Rangers did a couple 5 years ago with Lafreniere. Hopefully they could get Gavin McKenna. So I think it's fine. It's a win-win. They're not going to get him, but you could only hope. No one thought the Islanders were going to get a Schaefer this year. So
yeah, well, at least you're giving yourself a chance, right? You don't want to be out of the Gavin McKenna sweepstakes. And I like what you said, how you don't really know what the outlook of the Rangers are going to be next year. And you kind of hear that the Rangers are open to pretty much everything. They kind of seem like sellers right now because they're open to hearing offers about pretty much everyone except Panarin, Fox, and Igor.
Yeah, I think we're going to be talking about the Rangers a lot this offseason because I think everything is on the table, like you said, other than Fox, Igor, and maybe JT Miller.
Yeah, I was going to say, I don't even think.
Where do you think the Breadman's on the market by the deadline?
He could be on the market. If they're not good, he's a UFA at the end of the year. So
yeah, I was going to say, I think that Panarin isn't safe. I think Panarin could be trade bait. But listen, that's a conversation for July 1st, little offseason prediction, whatever we got going on. But I want to take a look at the Dallas Stars.
Yeah,
you called it. I'll let you take over with this one. You know what you want to say.
Yeah, so we talked about last week how Dallas made the move to get rid of Marchment, and I wanted to say more about Maverick Bork, who is one of the RFAs. He's 22, maybe 23 years old. He was stuck on the Dallas fourth line last year, and he showed great signs. I think he got some power play minutes too when people were hurt, but he was stuck on their fourth line because Dallas's forwards were so deep, and they traded away Marchment, like like we talked about last week, and they used that money. They re-signed Maverick Bork, who's RFA, as well as Nils Lundqvist. But I think Maverick Bork is going to be a very sneaky player that we're going to be talking about next year for Dallas. He's going to be their second line, third line winger, and I think he's going to put up 50 points. I don't know if that's a hot take or not, but watch out for him with how good and how deep Dallas's team is. He's just another winger that's going to come up and produce right away, just like Logan Stankoven did. They traded him off. Mason Marchment did, and then they traded him off. He's the next winger for Dallas that's going to get a big contract in a couple years.
Or are they going to trade him off?
They could. You never know with these teams.
The one thing that I'm going to say is that he had 25 points in 73 games this year, so it might be a little bit of a hot take, but I also don't hate that take. Like you said, he's 23 years old. He's young. So he's 23. He showed a lot of promise this year. Give him a little bit of an extended role. Who knows? Like we've seen crazier jumps from one season to another, both positive and negative. But no, 100% props on that. You called it. That's one thing that we spoke about after when they signed Lundqvist too, how I was going to mention him and be like, yeah, like I think that they should extend him. He's a young defenseman. Like you still don't know what his ceiling is or whatever. You have a better idea, but you don't know. You don't know what's going to happen. So I'm glad they signed both of them. I think that Dallas in the position that they are in, it's good that they're trying to stay younger while also maintaining that competitive build that they've honestly maintained so well. We touched up on this a little bit at the end of last pod, but Jonathan Toews is returning to the NHL. Come July 1st, it'll be made official. We now know that it's a $2 million contract. He's got a lot of bonuses. He's got $500,000 bonuses for 20, 30, 40, 50, and 60 games played, along with some additional bonuses if whatever happens in the playoffs. I mean, we touched up on it a little bit. What do you guys think of the contract itself?
Yeah, I think the contract's pretty nuts. I was not expecting that many bonuses, and I don't know what the Jets' plan is with Taves. I don't know if they're gonna give him a workload or they're just gonna throw him right into the fire and play him hopefully a full 82 games. But if I'm a GM, I think I saw somebody else talking about it on whatever Instagram or TikTok, but I don't like the bonuses being just games played bonuses. I like a production bonus, and like I know Taves, you're not expecting the production when you bring him in, but like he could just be there and be a detriment to the team trying to earn bonus money. I mean, at that point you could just bench him, but what was the point of signing him in the first place? So, like if he's a bad player and you're paying him an extra $2 million just for playing 40 games of the season, I don't think that's worth it. We'll see how he performs, and I mean, I'm very interested to see, and I'm rooting for him because he was one of my favorite players, but I just don't like the bonus deal. I know it doesn't count towards their cap, but just my opinion, I guess.
Personal reasons. I agree with that. Makes sense.
Yeah, I also thought it was a little bit high, especially since, you don't really know what you're going to get out of him at this age and being out of the league for 2 or 3 years. I don't know if they've seen some film that the public hasn't, or I'm sure they've done private skates with him. I don't know. I mean, good for Jonathan Toews. Great deal for him on the Winnipeg side. We'll see if it works out. We'll see what he's able to do. And yeah, those bonuses are nuts to be able to just get $500K for playing 20 games. Like,
yeah,
I think that's a no-brainer. Give me the ink.
I mean, yeah, give me the ink, but like Dozer said, if you're a detriment to the team, I mean, listen, Winnipeg's they're a competitive team. They just won the President's Trophy. I mean, obviously they didn't provide in the playoffs, but they're a team that's still looking to win a Stanley Cup, which I feel like is one of the biggest reasons why they brought someone in like Jonathan Toews. Captain Series has captained 3 cups in 5 years with a modern day dynasty in Chicago. But like we said, the bonuses are a lot. If he's a detriment, they could just bench him. Like at the end of the day, it doesn't count towards the cap. And if you got to sit him, you got to sit him. So listen, I don't hate it. Like you said, Dozer, I'm rooting for Jonathan Toews. Grew up big fan. You always love a comeback story. But I mean, any other little comments regarding the draft, trades, signings?
Let's see how it goes.
We got a couple days. We'll see who got most out of 10 picks right. And yeah, we'll catch up again after the NHL draft. Till next time, I'm Swallow Mihas alongside Michael Cardoza and Matt Milko. Thank you for listening to the Three Gyms Talk Hockey. Peace.
Peace.